about the past. But it is about coming together to associate with friends, sharing a common heritage, regardless of our ethnic and cultural backgrounds. It unites us in a bond. And it's about this bond that I want to talk to you about. And why it's a bond and what it's all about. Thank you for the honor of asking me to speak to you, especially as you can see, as you will see, I'm an outlier. And certainly not as distinguished as a lot of you. Like Jade here, to give him his proper title, Tan Sri Mani Jagadisan. My earliest memory of Jade was in the late 1950s, running in the 440 yards into school sports at Jalan Besar, when he was so far ahead of the field that 100 yards before the finishing line, he slowed down and waved to us for all the cheers. I can remember that vividly, I can tell you that. And that's right. Don't tell me it's wrong, because I saw it. It's no wonder he subsequently went on to carry the ACS flag to not just one, but three Olympic Games. Three. His nickname, being the fastest man in Asia at the time, for quite some time, was the Flying Doctor. So I said to myself, why me? I was probably asked, as Suresh said, because of my family's close involvement with ACS for over 100 years, quite a while. Indeed, ACS is very much interwoven into my DNA. My hope in relating my connection, that it might stimulate all of you to look back in your own connection with ACS like me. And it may surprise you as it surprised me. I can tell you that. So please do. It would be a fitting gift for yourselves on this 135th anniversary of the school. As I speak, I would like you to recall the words of our anthem, which you've just sung. The words will echo through my stories. I left ACS at the age of 14. After Form 3, to go to a New Zealand boarding school. My mum, who is now, as Suresh said, 102, still cries when she remembers this. Alone, I could only come back once a year, and there was no internet. We had to write a letter to each other once a week. I went as a refugee from Lee Kuan Yew because of his early disastrous experimentation with the education system. It was absolutely awful. Teachers left, and there was hardly any good teachers left in a lot of schools. We must never ever forget the trials that Singaporeans had to face to build the success story that is Singapore today. These were largely due to the old man, I can tell you, himself, sometimes throwing the baby out of the bathwater, but excused now because of his immense achievements, which rescued the country from oblivion. No doubt about that. You can judge him any way you like. But for me, as a physician, he obeyed the first rule in medicine. What? Have a live patient. Although sometimes the medicine has often been rather harsh and distasteful. My first encounter with Harry Lee Kuan Yew was when Harry Lee, that's his name, he was known as Harry in Cambridge. When he made us change Founders Day, a precious anniversary, as you can see by all of you here. This was the price we had to pay to have him speak to us on Founders Day. I was there in the auditorium. He sneeringly lambasted ACS as being elitist, this upstart from Raffles Institution. go down well, I can tell you. He appeared to be totally arrogant and without sensitivity and compassion. Indeed, he actually said this about himself on many interviews. He was a complete cold pragmatist. However, in spite of this, he appointed a large number of ACS board people, and one of them was going to be his principal private secretary. And eventually, after a few years, he was promoted to be head of Singapore's public service. Do you know what that is? It's an enormous institution that runs everything in Singapore.
Lim Siong Guan.
Lim Siong Guan, my classmate. I'm proud to call Siong Guan my classmate, but not because of his positions, because he was a true ACS boy. And can I tell you, he would have brought compassion and the best of Christianity into pragmatic Singapore. No doubt about it. He's still like that.
But you look younger than him.
No. Oh, don't tell him that. You'll get your throat cut.
So once you live in Singapore, you'll be gone.
I've got more hair.
Thank God for everything.
Siong Guan is a gem, I can tell you. He comes to all of our things. He's been in my chat group, I'll tell you about it. After 40 years of disconnection, I was found by a classmate, Teo Julam. Julam's daughter was at Melbourne Uni, and he wanted to ask me to come to our 40th anniversary of our class of 62. Why? Why would he want to do so? I mean, our lives had diverged. He was a property developer. I was a physician. Poles apart. Heather, my wife, and I made a special trip to go. When I went to the reunion, I met up with some old classmates, some of whom I barely knew, but clicked immediately. My wife, who was Irish, would say it was like putting on an old pair of boots. Familiar, worn, instantly comfortable. Mind you, it had also a lot to do with sharing the passion of Singapore's national sport. No, Jade, it wasn't the 440. It was actually lining up for hawker food. A few die-hard foodies, especially one Franklin Wong, Hong Kong. I can't get used to calling people by their Christian names these days. I mean, I knew him as Hong Kong, so he's Hong Kong to me all the time. Now he's Frank, you know. It's anyway, whatever. He started a WhatsApp chat group to keep us together. It has been a life changer, I can tell you. I think some of you might have it, but especially during COVID, communication with news, rubbish, gossip, and sometimes very, very heated arguments, especially about the place of China in this world. And I can tell you, but always with ACS humor and always with what little Malay I've got left, a lot of chocho. It took him quite an effort to set this up. And I asked Frank, why did you bother doing this, you know? And he referred me to the ACS anthem. Our hearts, our hopes, our aims are one. No discord will sever. We'll stand together for the cause of ACS forever. You may be the prodigal son, but ACS will always find you and bring you home. If not in flesh, in spirit. In spirit. And then there is Suresh here. This group does not just happen. Nothing like this just happens. It happened through the hard work of quite a few people. And I know that there's a lot more than Suresh too, but Suresh has been one of the rocks, Jumeng and Alex and a whole lot of people here. Number of enthusiasts here tonight. I would like to thank you very, very sincerely. What you have done is so precious to the beacon of truth and light, which is ACS. Fellows, don't let I know this is being YouTube, so I would like to appeal to people not here. Don't let the light grow dim. Come and support these gatherings. Put one on yourself. Create a chat group like Frank. Make it happen, or the light will fade. Now the second story. I knew that my family's history was closely intertwined with ACS, but it took this request to talk to you that I went back and did some research. And as you will learn yourself, I was quite amazed how it wove itself into me. Just to recap, and I think you've got the history already, ACS was founded in 1886 by two American Methodist missionaries, the bishop of the area, Thorburn, and the man designated to be on the ground, Oldham, our dauntless hero, who came from Western Shores. Actually, he was born in India as an English Catholic, married an Irish Catholic, but adopted, whose name was Mary Mulligan, but adopted American Methodism. They were both multilingual. Chinese merchants called upon him to teach their sons. And I was going to mention their names, but you can get them from me. They were amazing. But we were commiserating there that none of the houses were named for these people. 6 Chinese boys came to Mari Oldham's home. Within 1 year, the enrollment grew to 90. And the school had to be moved to dedicated premises, as you know now, 70 Amoy Street. And it only became possible because of a lot of these Chinese businessmen giving a huge amount of money. I think in 1890, I think it was something like $12,000. Can you imagine how much that is? The mind boggles. English was taught in the mornings. Hokkien was taught in the afternoons. And so it became the Anglo-Chinese school.
Not Anglo-Hokkien school.
You haven't been listening to Xi Jinping. He says there's no such thing as Hokkien and Cantonese. There's only Chinese. Anywhere you are in the world. These people were high caliber men. They were altruistic, community-minded, and concerned not only with education, but also to things like the welfare of women. I mean, look, it would have been tough for the boys and men in Singapore at that time. But just imagine for the girls, the women, in opium-riddled, swampy Singapore. So, look up these people. A number of you will have connections with them. And we have a tremendous heritage to care for each other, with people like that. Other ethnic groups soon enrolled and a proper curriculum was needed. So apart from the missionaries and religious people, the closest source of English-speaking teachers was from India and Ceylon, or Sri Lanka. In 1919, 101 years ago, after the First World War, my grandfather, Samuel Thevathasan, already a prominent teacher in Jaffna, he was a graduate of Jaffna College and Madras University. In that time, they were both affiliated. He was lured to Singapore to teach Latin and English. Singapore was a backwater compared to Ceylon. And he came only under sufferance to stay for a few years before returning to the civilization of Jaffna. How times have changed. He brought his 5-year-old son, my father, Arthur, and during his time studied divinity at one of the only colleges, Trinity College in Singapore. And he became a pastor. He had 7 children, one of whom died. It's a real marvel to see they could teach and have 7 kids as well. Not to mention his wife, Joy, my grandmother, who was a remarkable lady, you can well imagine, blessed with a lot of foresight. Samuel was a very fair, upright, morally impeccable Christian man, who, unlike the times, had no racial prejudice, and took the parable of the Good Samaritan as his credo. And this was going to stand him in good stead later on, as you can see. And in fact, this is something that we are instilled with in ACS, isn't that right? Right from the word go. That's one of the bonds we share as all ACS boys. regardless of color, class or creed, we come together in perfect harmony and respect instilled into every ACS student. Another source of teachers were all boys. One of these was Henry Hoisington, a Tamil burgher from Jaffna. He won a scholarship to go to Cambridge and then returned to teach maths. Hoisington was, of course, the person who wrote our school anthem, the lyrics of the school anthem. He was a mathematician of all things. And this is what ACS can produce, a mathematician writing the lyrics of the school anthem. In the late 1920s, there was a prestigious headmastership on offer for Samuel in Ceylon. But Joy had created a wide circle of friends in Singapore, and he had also become a pastor of the Tamil church. But the pull to go back was enormous, because Singapore was sort of down, this sort of thing. Joy wanted him to stay, and no doubt filled his ears with it every night. But as a good Tamil patriarch, he had to get male advice. So he boarded a taxi to Seremban to consult an old friend. Yeah, there were no Jalan Raya freeways or touch and go in those days. I tell you, there was a dirt road and things. So on the way, the taxi swerved to avoid a bullock cart, and it overturned, and it threw Samuel into a paddy field ditch, and he was knocked out. As he slowly came to, he saw a bright light and someone waving at him in the background. The taxi was righted, and he returned to tell Joy that he had been given a sign by God to stay in Singapore. He had an epiphany, no less. You have no idea how many times Joy has blessed that bullock cart. Samuel eventually became headmaster at Coleman Street. And later my father, Arthur, took over ACS involvement by being president of the ODA, school board, first school board with Theo Chan B. And subsequently my brothers, their sons, attended ACS. And my older brother, Ivor, whom some of you would know, car freak, he was also served on the board for 13 years and was chairman of Oldham House. So I am actually very much an outlier, I'm sorry to say. Speaking to you guys,
But you're our outlier.
That's right. ACS attracted a large number of students of all races. And recall, if you will, the second verse of our anthem. Our students hail from China's plains and from the land of the rising sun. The war came, the Second World War. Singapore was overrun by the Japanese. Anyone connected with the British or Americans were interrogated by the dreaded Kampatai. They were headquartered at the old YMCA building in Fort Canning. They were interrogated, then often imprisoned, killed, or sent to prison camps, labor camps. ACS headmaster T.W. Hinch was sent to Changi prison at the time, and ACS was closed. Samuel, because of his association, was called up. He sat quaking on a bench with others near the commandant's office. After some hours of great anxiety, enhanced by the screams of some of those people being tortured in one of the rooms, a senior Japanese officer walked by. He caught sight of Samuel and went up to him. "Hello, sir. What are you doing here?" He was one of Samuel's pupils. He shook his hand warmly and remembered the good old days at ACS. After a tremulous explanation by Grandpa, he quickly went into the commandant's office, got papers signed for him, and came out to escort Samuel home to the relief of the whole family. This is a true story of ACS brotherhood. You know, I guess all of us here have had to make choices to part from Singapore. But one thing stays. That's our fondness and association with our old school. And to say that you're an old boy or girl of ACS means instant acceptance to another. This is just great being here with all of you. Thank you very much. But with ACS as always, remember, the best is yet to be.
Amen. Thank you, Mano.